Welcome
to
Sacrilege.
As usual, that's our specialty.
I wonder how
we
many,
say a lot of irreverent things.
How many nuns inadvertently stumble on the Carmudgeon show and just are sitting there like with their crosses catching fire, screaming sacrilege at their televisions.
I hope
on Samsung TV Plus, which is blank.
I hope none.
You don't like nuns being offended at everything you say and do and are.
Is that a part of their being? I don't know anything about nuns.
Me neither.
All right. Well, let's get on to the topic of something that we do know about. This is the Carmudgeon Show, part of the Haggerty Podcast Network. That is Jason Cammisa. I am Derek Tam-Scott. This week's episode is about sacrilege, as we mentioned.
And specifically the Sacrilege Motors Blackbird, which is a electric converted Porsche 911. And I think you're going to find that we have a discussion that's probably not in the direction you expected us to go in. If you like this content, you might consider joining the Haggerty Drivers Club, which includes unlimited guaranteed flatbed tow and roadside assistance for all of your classic cars and unlimited access to our valuation tools, as well as a subscription to our award-winning magazine, discounts and on cool stuff and VIP events and such. There's a link below, and that is Derek Tam-Scott or something. I haven't been introducing you lately. I feel like when I'm writing
myself
in the description, but you need to like double down on the hyphen thing because people are not calling you hyphen. They're calling you Derek Clapton now.
Trying to clap.
Bye. Hey, children, put down your phone. You're recording, aren't you? We're doing that young person thing, right? Where we're sitting on our phones while everyone's waiting for us to talk. Hey. Psst. We're actually recording.
What are we talking about? What are you here for?
I don't know.
Charging your batteries?
I'm charging your battery? That's my wallet.
No, I was charging mine.
Oh, okay. We're here to talk about how this episode is going to start with singing.
What?
Yeah.
Every so often when you do this and then people are enthusiastic about it, it just boggles the mind.
Yeah, because people are masochists. And the idea of hearing either
Can't they
of us
just buy an
screeching
old Volkswagen instead then?
They're not crazy. They're just masochists. There's a song. Come on. I just tried to get Randy Popes to sing this song with me, and he wouldn't do it.
What song?
What car are we covering today?
The automobile.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night.
Oh, this
Take
is
these
the Beatles.
broken wings and learn to fly.
I don't know the lyrics.
All my
But I at least know what it is this time.
You were only waiting for this moment to arrive. Are you kidding?
It's a song about SR-71s.
I think it might predate SR-71s. It is a Beatles song.
Oh, the SR-71. I am going to hold... No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, shit.
But the SR-71 was created in response to Francis Gary Powers getting shot down over...
Who is that?
Francis Gary Powers is the guy who got... I'm about to tell you. It's the guy who got shot down in a U-2, an American spy plane over the Soviet Union in 1960. May 1st, 1960. It immediately caused a really stark deterioration in relations between the...
You must
Soviet
have been very
Union,
upset at the time.
Soviet Union and the United States. And in response, a faster spy plane was created called the SR-71 Blackbird, which came out in 1960.
The year is important because Blackbird, which was 66? On the White Album, was 68. Oh. Which yes, also, by the way...
definitely, the SR-71 came out before that.
Which also, by the way, had the song Back in the USSR on it, I believe. Mm-hmm. So maybe that whole album was all about...
Back in the USSR was earlier, I think.
Was it not on the White Album? Maybe it's on Abbey Road. No, hold on.
Look it up. We're out over our skis. This has nothing to do.
I wasn't there at the time. I know all the songs. Flew in from Miami Beach, BOA, 68. White Album.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Hold on. No, it was on the double album, The Beatles, but it was the same year. You know the crazy thing about the Beatles is not the Volkswagen Beatles, the music group, the Beatles, where people fainted and whatever. Their like entire discography all happened in like 6 days. It was like, if you look at their first album, like their biggest hits to the end of the Beatles, I think, what album was the last one? 68, 69?
70.
It was over. It was
Let It Be, Hey Jude, whatever album that was.
Oh, God, I missed that thing. Hey Jude.
So, 1963 to 1970.
Yeah, very quick, flash in the pan. Anyway, enough of the Beatles.
And 7 years. That's not nothing. Certainly not one-hit wonders.
For the amount of...
journey that they went on.
Yeah.
They got real... high.
real fast. I mean, they started out, very sort of,
Yes.
can't buy me love, like all 50s, like happy, and then just got Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm surprised that you're a Beatles fan.
My mother is of the age, specifically.
My mother was so pissed when I started listening to the Beatles in like the 80s when I was, in my 40s. She was like, I just finally stopped having to listen to those fucking songs on the radio. Would you stop? Because I was like, all I listened to was the Beatles. But anyway, I digress. We are here to talk about a car that is named the Blackbird.
Not the airplane.
Which sings
You didn't
in the
even look
dead
what
of
year
night.
the airplane came out, but it was before 1968.
You're positive about this?
Yes, positive.
I don't have to look this up. You're not going to be
it was
proven
like
wrong.
1960.
Blackbird, what is it? SR what?
SR71.
SR70. Why wasn't it in 71? Why
Because,
shouldn't have been
71
Blackbird
was
70? Retired in
was
99, December 22nd, 1964. So conceivably, Blackbird could have been written about that plane
Aircraft.
if the blackbird singing in the dead of night take these broken wings and learn to fly. Maybe not. Anyway.
And it was probably classified.
Only waiting for this moment to... Anyway, we drove
The car
a
is called Blackbird.
Yes. Okay, so we went and drove an electric Restomod 911 done by a company called Sacrilege Motors. Mm-hmm. And my immediate determination watching your Steam fuck. So they invited me to drive the car and I'm like, I need to have Derek here because we need to do a podcast episode on this. And I knew exactly what was going to happen given that it's a 964 and you were going to be violent that it was a 964. And I was going to have to point out, that them calling it Sacrilege Motors takes the wind out of all the sails of all the arguments that you have by saying this is
true.
Sacrilege.
It doesn't.
Yes, literally.
But it's still an abomination. Conceptually, this is an abomination.
Why don't you tell the audience why you feel? So here's the thing. We both drove the car, and have we talked about this really at all?
No, maybe like a few minutes over lunch during car week.
Yeah, our friends made us tell them what we thought. And I think we've exchanged one or two sentences about this. So I'm just guessing that you hate everything. But you did say it's sacrilege. And I'm like, yeah, they fucking say it. Literally says it right on it.
I didn't say it was sacrilege because the company's called Sacrilege. You're putting words in my mouth.
Okay, well, say why it's wrong and wrong on so many levels and why you disagree with this. And then I'll probably say the same thing.
It doesn't need any explanation. It's one of the best driver's cars of all time. And
964?
Yeah. I think it's great.
I think it's the least desirable of all of the air-cooled cars.
Less so than a 993?
Everyone else seems to value 993s much. I don't.
No, 993s are worth less than 964s now.
Oh, really?
Yes.
When did that happen?
In the last 5 or 10 years.
This is how much I pay attention to the squished Beetle market.
Yeah, 993s are worth less. Okay. But most people like them more. But they made fewer 964s. 964 is one of my very favorite generations.
They're all boringly competent. And that's, that's
but not boring to drive.
How many miles per hour? Hundreds of miles an hour does your car do in first gear? Second gear, third? I can't get excited about a car that I get to shift once and then go to jail. Especially a car that's that fucking slow and that lack of torquey down low. Oh, you're going to hate me after this.
The 3.6s have real torque.
The 993. So our friend, GG, God, he's going to kill us, has a 993. And every time I'm in it, I'm like, wow, is he floored? And of course, you can see the pedals. And I can see his foot is firmly in the carpet. And there is nothing happening.
Yeah, that's because it's a heavy pig because it's a 993 and it's four-wheel drive.
Okay.
When they are sort of trimmed up a little bit and rear-wheel drive, they're not so bad. They're actually really great.
Oh, not so bad. That's not a high
964
compliment.
RS is my favorite generation. If I could only drive one 911 forever, it would be a 964
How many
RS.
millions of dollars are those worth?
0.25.
That's a lot of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Okay. So go on your speech.
Yes, this is the part where I have to be explaining the position coming in. Okay, so 964s were built in small numbers. Porsche was almost going out of business. They are really well-made cars. They are a pleasure to drive. It's a useful modernization that does not destroy the essence of a 911, and it is, to me, one of the best 911s there is to drive. And so to fundamentally alter one is, yes, sacrilegious. Did I do a sufficient job?
Yes.
Okay,
Tell me
great.
more about 964. It was the first to have power steering.
Yes, 964 is the first to have power steering. It's the first to have McPherson struts. It was the most substantial redesign that the 911 received to date. So the 911 came out in 1963 functionally. They started production in pilot form in 64. 65 is when things really got started going. So the 964 arrives in 1989. It debuts in coupe four-wheel drive form, the Carrera 4. It has, like I said, McPherson struts, power steering, which is actually really excellent power steering, ABS for the first time, some computer-controlled stuff for the first time, like the HVAC system, and there's like a sort of onboard check control diagnostics functionality that the car has. It's a twin-plug engine that's 3.6 liters. It makes 247 horsepower.
How much do they weigh?
Else?
In two-wheel drive form?
3,050 or so.
And still semi-trailing arm, not yet the 5-link.
Yeah, it does not have a multi-link arrangement. It has trailing arms.
It was 993 that brought the multi-link, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so there's your 964. And it is basically the rarest of all of the air-cooled cars, right?
Porsche, there was a recession and the cars were too expensive during that period. And so, like, for example, in the United States, they sold 3,800 cars in 1993 against 31,000 cars in 1986 in North America.
That's a huge
So
drop.
they're pretty rare cars. People always cut them up to make stuff. That's what Singers are made out of. That's what a lot of Restomods are made out of. And I think they're pretty cool cars, and they've become collectible and expensive, partly because of the rarity, I suspect. And so I always hate seeing them get cut up.
Why is it that everyone's always cutting up 964? That was your first reaction, is God damn it, they had to cut up a 964. You couldn't cut up a 993.
Yes.
Is what you said.
Yes.
Why do you think everyone's always cutting up 964s?
Because the 993 has the headlights pushed back and the fenders that are more aerodynamic, and the rear fenders are shaped differently, and so you can't backdate one of those cars easily because the headlights aren't in the right place. The headlights in a 964 and the rear light openings and all that stuff is identical to every previous generation of long wheelbase 911, which started in 1969. So if you want to backdate a car and have it look like a 70s car, you want to start with a 964. Otherwise, the fenders are wrong, and the front and rear, and the wipers are in the wrong place, and there's a bunch of the window weather stripping around the doors is wrong also.
They are the same doors.
They're the same
for
doors, but
993s,
they have windlace there that is present that isn't on the early cars, and so if you want to chrome it, you have to do more stuff.
Okay.
So that's why people always cut apart 964s, because it's the only modern under the skin car that has the upright aesthetic as the 70s cars.
Okay. So this was a cab.
It was a cabriolet. It was an America cab, Tiptronic. So
it
that
deserved
really
to die.
helped me get past the making the car die part.
Yeah. I mean,
Not die.
They could have put a manual swap. They manual swapped it.
Yes, you could have easily manual swapped the Tiptronic to
But they chose instead to rip the engine out and the beating heart of the 911 out, and replace it with an electric motor and 2 batteries. Interestingly enough, Sacrilege claims that the weight of the car and its weight distribution is unchanged, which is pretty amazing.
Yep, I was impressed by that.
Battery capacity was what, if 61 kilo? This is a couple of weeks ago, and I did not.
I don't know. I barely speak electric car.
I think it was 61 kilowatt hours. Quite significant, but that's good for 200 something miles.
Yes.
Wow, it would really been great if I had taken a picture of the spec sheet that they gave us.
I thought I did, but I didn't.
I thought
have
I
it
did
at
too.
home.
In
It's on
fact,
my nightstand.
Oh, well, that's helpful. Can we just go to your place?
Change
and
of venue.
We'll just record there.
From my nightstand.
Anyway, okay, so there are 2 fundamental questions that I went into this trying to answer. Number 1, is there a market for this type of car? And number 2, is it well executed? Right. And so is there a market? You can call it sacrilegious. You can be upset that it's a 964 or whatever else, but the market will ultimately determine, a line of buyers will determine whether there's a market for it. That's not up to me to decide. I think they're probably not wrong that they could sell 10 of these a year.
Which is the target.
Is a target, or 1 a month or thereabouts or whatever. I don't know exactly what their targets are, but the car is $850,000.
Yes, non-trivial.
Non-trivial. However, the next question becomes, is this a well-done conversion, or is this just a hack job? And I am here to say I think it was incredibly well done.
I totally agree. I thought it was really well turned out, and the functionality of the whole thing was really remarkably excellent, and just a nice car with no functional foibles or anything like that.
I mean, a Restomod is well turned out when the only real complaint I have is that there's a little display in the speedometer that's or in the tack, I guess, in the center. What used to be the
No, always tack.
Used to be the tack. Yeah, it was the tack and is now a power output gauge. And you can't see it with polarized glasses on. And I'm like, oh, that's easy. Just turn the gauge crooked like everyone does in the 911s, or they do from vibration themselves, or I don't understand the cause of that weirdness, but I'm not a Porsche weenie.
People do it to themselves.
I know. But that would solve that issue. But if that's the biggest issue, like, holy shit. So... Yeah.
It was incredibly well executed.
Every one of the gauges is custom made, and I thought that was a really cool touch. Mm-hmm. So you have the same sort of, I guess it's 5 gauge spread of Porsche gauges, and I will look at the picture on this because I don't remember. Again, we drove this before Car Week, so this is quite
ancient history.
Ancient histoire, as the French wouldn't say.
They most certainly would not.
But there's obviously that output gauge. Let me see. There's a battery level gauge, which I love that they did. So it's 0 to 100%, and it's huge. And so you have this big sweeping needle for that instead of like, I feel like everyone else just does like a little percentage or like a tiny gauge, right? And on an electric car, it's pretty cool to see a big gauge with a big needle with that big of a sweep. You can actually watch it move,
which is naughty.
If you're being naughty. So yeah, that's sort of second. On the first is a battery temperature and motor temp split gauge left right, kind of unnecessary, also kind of cool.
Well, there's 5 holes in the dashboard.
Yeah, they got to fill it somehow. The middle one is kilowatts of output plus that small screen, and then you have miles per hour as a digital gauge 0 to 140, and then last you have car battery voltage, so the low voltage, i.e. the 12 volt system, and then EV battery voltage, which is completely useless. I mean,
that's where the clock would have originally lived. Right. On the left gauge, you would have originally had fuel gauge and oil level. And then the next one over would be oil temperature and oil pressure. And then the middle one is tack. The next one is speedo, and the right one is clock, normally.
Yeah, but I love that they did this. I love that they kept the gauges. The only thing I feel like it's missing is the digital speed readout, because as always with Porsches with small steering wheel.
There's one in the middle, right? That was the one you were struggling to read. Wasn't there a digital speed readout in the...
No, I don't think it had one. That was my complaint, is that like I would love to have a digital speed readout in that LCD.
Yes, I see.
And okay, do you really need a digital speed readout? No, but it's something we've sort of become accustomed to on modern cars. I love that. I love the rest of the interior. Like the whole thing was just beautifully executed with a lot of different patterns, which I usually don't like. Like pick a theme and stick to it.
Yeah, it also had a number of eras that were colliding in the interior. There was some stuff that was from the 70s, some stuff that was, from the 60s, some of it was from the 90s. So if you're a Porsche weenie, then that's the kind of stuff you care about. If you don't, if you're not a Porsche weenie, then you're like, I don't know, it looks nice.
Yeah, I'm not a Porsche weenie, so it all looked vintage. I mean, little things like the door pulls, like that's just such a typical. You're okay. Porsche thing. I loved the seats with the little metal rings in them. Steering wheel was nice and tiny and whatever. But functionally, you get in and turn the key, and it said something on the little gauge like "crank me" or something like.
Yes,
something like silly, like a little bit of a sense of humor. Okay. Oh, and then I love that the logo for Sacrilege Motors is the electronic symbol for a battery. I don't know if you noticed that. And there's that element in the taillight that has their logo, which is subtle. I like the subtlety of that.
Yeah.
One battery in the trunk, one battery in the trunk, which would have been the engine compartment, with reservoirs for the
brake fluid and power steering.
No, I'm talking the back. The Penske remote reservoir shocks.
Remote reservoir for the suspension. So the suspension was quite trick. It was really carefully engineered and developed to, I think, make it function in a certain way, which it did do. It did do.
Okay. So the other crazy thing about this whole thing was we were at Isimi for this. The car was sort of housed there before Car Week, and we walk in, and everything there was electric. Like it was all electromods. There was that gorgeous Alpha.
Oh, the totem.
The totem thing, which is just absolutely stunningly drop dead gorgeous. I know you probably think it's sacrilege.
I think it's more sacrilegious than this Porsche, actually.
Oh, really? How can something be more sacrilegious than something that says Sacrilege Motor on it?
It's
Anyway.
aspirational.
Okay. So we both took it up in the mountains and drove it.
I would also add, in discussing with them, they said all of the stuff we did is reversible. They didn't make any fundamental changes to the architecture or chassis of the car that couldn't be reversed, which also gave me some solace.
I think that was a really cool point, actually. So,
totally
if I
agree.
were spending real money on this 964 or any real car, knowing that I could put it back to the way it was is pretty cool. That was one of the reasons why they couldn't use a 993, they said, because the way they designed the motor, I believe it was, wouldn't have fit right into a 993. Yep. So that's one of the reasons they chose 964. But yeah. So they claim 500 horsepower, 500 Newton meters.
It didn't feel that strong to me.
No, I think I saw 180 kilowatts pegged on that middle gauge, which is, the conversion divided by 0.7.
1.34.
It was not 500 horsepower fast, in my opinion. Glad we had
I think we had that. Wasn't there multiple modes and we had it maybe dialed in mild instead of medium?
That's
or
240
like
horsepower. I mean, that's half of what they're claiming.
That's what the stock power is on the car.
Yeah. That's what it felt like. It felt about that. So I was in the hairy mode. There were a bunch of modes which map both throttle progression and also regen. And I think there were 2 modes that you could choose from. And in full fat mode, it's EV quick, meaning, instant off the line. This is the first 911, first quote unquote air cooled 911, and the batteries on this car are water cooled, which is extra sacrilegious. It was the first air cooled 911 that I've ever driven that spun its tires off the line. I mean, you just don't do that in a 911 because of weight distribution unless you're really terrible, being terrible to it. But it was really fast, and the off the line and the throttle progressiveness and the transition to regen, which can be very, very difficult to get right, was perfect. I would say it's probably a 5-second to 60 car, which would.
Road and Track tested the 1989 Carrera 4 to 60 miles an hour in 4.9 seconds.
Okay. I mean, that's with
247 horsepower and a 5-speed manual.
And that's with a horrific redline clutch dump,
that's
I'm
correct,
sure.
because it's 4-wheel drive especially, so it's not doing any wheel spin.
Okay. And then we got in the twisties.
We haven't talked about this at all. It drives like a 911.
God damn, is that steering good?
Yeah.
How the fuck? So now is the time where I have to stop pretending to hate 911s and go back into like real. How the fuck does power steering feel that good?
I know, isn't that wild?
Why can no one else do that?
This is the thing about the 964 that I really adore, is that it has good steering and it has modern brakes, and you put real modern tires on it, but it still has an old 911 feel.
The brakes are a weirdness. You're used to them.
I'm used to them.
Because
everyone who's never driven a 911 always comments on this. I literally don't even notice it when I drive these cars.
I know, but it's the bottom hinge pedal means you're going to have an inch or two of sort of dead zone as the pedal gets to its top of its travel, and then it's fine. You get used to it, but it's definitely the whole thing felt very 911.
Yeah, it feels like a 911. That was the thing about it that most delighted me. I will admit fully, enthusiastically, that this car delighted me actually, in spite of all of the in spite of all of the shitting on it that I conceptually do. The execution and the experience actually makes it really enjoyable.
I very much liked it. What I liked most about it was that it was a convertible. So I've never driven
shit about that.
Well, here's the thing. I think so. For me, driving a vintage 911 is always about that engine, right? I mean, you have pedal position, it's unbelievable steering, right? So the bottom hinge pedals, steering, and then some vague shitty shifter.
No, that's only true before 1987.
They were never that good. They were vague and crappy. Let's be honest.
No, they're not. It's no worse than a BMW of the same era. And
like I said,
964.
Vague and crappy. This is not a Honda shifter. It's not a Mazda shifter. Sorry, insult his babies. But no, I don't think the shifters are a high point of any of the 911s. They're fine. Even 996, they've got
no, 996 is worse. I think that the 964 and the 993 is a little vague and long. Then the 960 again RS. Drive a 964 RS and it's genuinely great.
Fine, get me and driving a 964 RS and I'll shut up. But the flat six is one of the defining characteristic of that car. I mean, you hear it. So the idea of cutting that out of the car is really the biggest sacrilege for me, right? Just intuitively going in. And we've seen that car companies that are making electric sports cars are really having a hard time, or supercars are having a hard time selling them, right? Rimac is not selling Naveras by the boatload when everyone lost their fucking minds over the Tourbillon before anyone even sat in it, which is obviously combustion powered. And I think it was a genius move to make their first car as a convertible because your experience changes completely when you're driving with top down. You are listening to the tires, you are listening to, birds chirping and suspension noises and your environment in a very different way. You're not listening in a closed car, you're going to hear squeaks and rattles and sort of other old car noises that are masked by a loud vibraty sort of flat six. And I think it was really smart to make that car convertible because it's a hell of an experience.
Interesting.
And would be far less so with the top. You didn't notice that right away?
No, I was mostly interested and concerned about structural sort of implications because 911s were not designed to be convertibles in the first place. And so usually when I drive a 911 without roof, I miss the roof for structural reasons.
Did you hear?
No, I didn't actually. It felt quite good to me, which is interesting because they haven't made any substantial structural changes to the car.
I think they changed the whole interior. And I think what you're noticing on most of their cars is sort of mass produced.
Cowl shake, though, is what you get.
Yeah. What was missing to me was the squeaks and rattles, right? I just didn't hear. There's one tiny little rattle from the back. And the fact that I noticed it tells me there was not a chorus of them, which I typically hear in 911 cabs. So I thought, okay, either they brace the car and it could be that the battery, is mounted rigidly somehow and is bracing the whole thing. But no, I thought that was really cool. And then moving it up a back road.
Yes.
What was missing to me is they say the weight distribution is the same. You know these cars far better than I do, so I'll defer to you. But what I didn't feel was the back end moving around.
That may very well be the result of the suspension that they put in it. It's also when you have a wide body car with more tire on it, it just has more general grip. It's not as wayward and it has better controlled body motion, so you don't get that sort of dancing. It doesn't. It kind of did actually dance some, but it has certainly more grip than those cars usually do.
My favorite thing about driving a 911 is very easy to describe. You turn the wheel and you then feel the roll in the back, which is delayed, right? So the sort of back starts to roll over and you feel it as a negative tug at the steering wheel. So you feel that engine that's almost like this caged thing that is like, imagine like Tasmanian devil in a cage mounted in the back. You turn to the left and he goes to the right side of his cage. And that hit when poor little Taz is up against the side of the cage, you feel as a tug at the wheel. And I love managing that mass on a 911. I love feeling that, God damn it, this fucking screen went blank again. So be it. We are not going to have a Carmudgeon logo. I, for the record, wouldn't buy a fucking Samsung television if my life depended on it.
However, if you already have channel 1194, I'm just kidding.
No, 1194 is our stuff. But the problem with this particular Samsung TV is it just always wants to play Samsung TV Plus.
Yes.
Which again, you can watch this Carmudgeon show on Samsung TV Plus. So not to, shit on the hand that feeds us, but come on. Why does the TV just leave it on the input that I put anyway?
Jason is cross.
But I was talking about something that I love. Oh, the Tasmanian devil in the back. That's sort of like whatever. And I just feel like it was missing from this car. And maybe it's the suspension or maybe it's just the CG height of the engine.
Yeah.
I don't like button down on 11s.
Yes, I know. We all know that. What I really enjoyed about there's a number of things that I really enjoyed about this car, but one of the things I most enjoyed is the fact that it really helped me isolate some of the characteristics of the 911 that I really like. Because of course, when you're dealing with one of these cars and you're shifting and driving, it's hard to sort of break it into its component parts, the experience into its component parts. And if you change the powertrain, it's no longer part of the equation. It leaves stuff behind. And it was cool to get to focus on that stuff instead of having the powertrain sort of, like you said, dominate the experience to varying degrees. So that was really cool. I really enjoyed the 911 experience, even without the engine and the manual gearbox and the gear change. I certainly vastly prefer this experience to
Don't you say the
Tiptronic.
Don't say it.
Why?
No, because that's like saying I prefer oxygen to suffocating to death.
Yes,
I'm sorry. I have never driven a Tiptronic 964. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
If you gave it to me, I would light it on fire without insurance, just to make sure that it is removed from the earth.
Okay,
and not replaced in any meaningful
I
way.
prefer it to a Tiptronic. I also prefer it to a turbo. I would actually... I don't know if I would do this to a 964 turbo, but I believe that all 4-speed turbos, which is basically every year prior to 1989, that this experience is better than a 4-speed turbo.
I agree. I don't think the turbos sound all that great.
No.
They're so outspokenly turbocharged, blah, 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 blah. I like outspokenly turbocharged cars, but
but not when they're coupled with 4 tall,
ill-chosen,
widely spaced gear ratios.
No, I'm with you. I don't think I've enjoyed any 911 turbocharged 911 experience other than 991.1 base Carrera, which was fine, and
.2. That's turbo.
.2. I'm sorry, it's turbo, and also GT2. Yeah. God, we're very simpatico today.
I like the 5-speed turbos. I don't know if I like them more than naturally aspirated cars of the same era, but I like the 5-speed turbos. Whereas I 4-speed, I consider to be totally extinguished, to be converted. What else?
I'm looking at my notes as if you're wondering what I'm doing. It's enough, beautifully turned out, enough singery to almost qualify the price alone, to justify the price alone. That is interesting. I think I enjoyed driving this. God, I'm going to go to hell for saying this. I think I enjoyed driving, talk about sacrilege, enjoyed driving this more than I enjoyed the Singer 4-liter that I drove.
Interesting. I've never driven a 4-liter. I have driven a 3.8. I found it a little underwhelming. I would like more time in Singers. So I don't know if I would quite say that. I mean, the experience of, I don't know, really, that's quite a controversial statement.
Well, we're talking about, this is the sacrilege episode.
Yes. Okay.
I don't know, I like it quite a lot. I want my 911 to be cammy and angry and leaking oil, but for European smog zones in cities, very compelling. That's a different story. We'll get to that. Yeah. The Singer that I drove was so incredibly beautiful and so art-like and jewel-like. And that I love them for, but it was too buttoned up. Yeah. It was just too well put
Turned
together.
Out, yeah.
And I want filth.
That was my first impression of the Singer when I drove it. I said, this thing is so, the attention to detail in the way that it's constructed has transformed the car into something that is so good that it lacks the sort of character and texture of the underlying car. And
funny.
I drove it and I was like, man, this customer just paid $1 million or whatever for this car. And I prefer to drive, at the time, was my $36,000 964 with some hot rod parts on it. It just didn't have the character or texture or personality of a 911 anymore, in my experience.
Interestingly enough, where my mind went was if I wanted a 911 perfected, I would get a roof SCR.
Well, that car has so much texture and personality and there's nothing left of the original car. It just is a 911 shaped carbon fiber chassis car.
Right. But that's my point is if I wanted a modern sort of it's perfectly sorted. I guess the Singer's not modern, but if a perfectly sorted 911 to me, I just think I'd have a roof SCR. Yeah. It's a different experience. It's very different, but it's not very different. It is not the thing that I don't think most people realize, and I didn't until I was in that thing, is there's not a 911 part on that SCR.
Turn signal stocks or something.
Little shit like that, but there's no functional mechanical parts. Yes. It is completely not a Porsche. Correct. But it kept so much of many of the qualities that I love about driving early 911s just amped up to 11. Yeah. And the Singer was like, okay, let's just sort this thing to the point where it's probably amazing on a track and amazing from an engineering perspective,
and very pacey, very fast over the road.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved the idea that I have in my notes that I could leave the line with 10 degrees of opposite lock laying tire off the line. That's just something you can't do in a 911 unless you're in a GT2. But I had a couple of things about regen. I was a little bit nervous about really pushing that car. And then being able to have regen because the brake system is completely stock, right? So it's not like a blended brake pedal where the first bit of travel is regen.
Not stock, but
Okay.
not
It's non-blended.
not integrated with the regen.
Right. And so I worry about like, all right, you're in a car that's a Widowmaker, i.e. it's a 911, and you're moving at very high rate in a slippery condition, and you turn in and you have more regen, which is only on the back axle.
Yeah, so it's going to effectively act like standing on the or stabbing the brakes while you're turning in.
Worse, pulling the e-brake.
Yeah.
Or, or downshifting and having a lot of engine braking. I worry about that in a car like this. And I sort of think, okay, if the 964s did not have ABS,
they did. First ones with ABS.
I would love to see a 964, like a stability control system retrofitted to that. And I know that's out of scope with what that car is, but that would worry me a little bit daily driving it. And like, what happens if you hit a slippery patch is going to be a little bit tough. You don't hear overrun the way you do in a combustion car.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was one of my very few concerns was otherwise I could daily this.
Yeah. I came away with the same impression. I guess it's something that often comes out of electric cars is that this would be a hell of a daily because it's entertaining and has character and personality and it's fun to interact with and you feel this sort of magic of the air-cooled 911 experience with a sort of like, like you say, lay tire out of your driveway type of sort of, you don't have to be nice to the powertrain. You don't have to worry about a lot of second gear changes if you're driving around the city. It's a sort of removes some of the concern about using a special car from cold in urban environments, but you still get the sort of entertainingness of the chassis and steering and all of that. So I came away with the same conclusion. I said, and then the dimensions, it's really compact. And so you say, oh, this would be just such a cool thing to daily. And then that led me to my next thought, which I think was actually the place where I finally arrived with this car, where I was like, wow, interesting point, which is that if a car that offered exactly the same experience was offered by an OEM manufacturer and sold new to the public in mass production right now, it would absolutely explode the world. Everyone would be like, this is the best driver's car electric vehicle ever made. Like, all hope is not lost. This is the coolest thing ever. It's a true soul of a sports car EV delivered to us for the first time, except I guess maybe the Tesla Roadster, the original.
I was just going to bring that up.
And so like if that product that, it came in a completely different wrapper, it didn't look anything like it does now, but if that experience was just sold by an OEM to the public as a new car right now, I think it would just turn the world on its head.
I think you're right.
Sadly, at $850,000, that's not available. And I'm sure for structural and engineering and steering reasons, like just integrating that experience into a new product that was an EV now would be impossible. But I did sort of, as I was coming to terms with how much I mentally wanted to hate the idea versus the experience that I actually had, that was where I arrived. I said, if you could just put this in people's hands, they'd love it.
They'd love it. I had the same moment. I was, so the rep from Sacrilege was in the car with each of us as we drove. So this is how we didn't talk about it. We never drove the car together. And I was saying that the whole experience really reminded me of the Tesla Roadster. And I was lucky enough to be the first loan of the Tesla Roadster back in the day. And I really thought I was going to come away hating that car. And I sort of pitched a story to Tesla, and I got the car for 5 days, and I had this plan to do 5 days of car guy things with the car. Like, one of the days I literally bought my house. One of the days I went grocery shopping and just ran errands. One I did Wednesday night drags at Sonoma Raceway. I did a day of sort of back roads, and I dynoed the car. I had this whole plan.
Autocross.
I did not autocross it.
That would be a good one.
That would have been a great one. But, in there was a photo shoot and whatever else. And I made it 50 feet in that car. And I was like, oh, fuck, I'm wrong. Like, I love it. I absolutely love it. And went from thinking, like, who are these Silicon Valley assholes who took an Elise and just absolutely ruined it? And
added weight.
And it's, 1,000 pounds more than fuck this. And it's an automatic or no gearbox at that time. And just absolutely, I didn't want one. I wanted buying an Elise. And not a Tesla Roadster. But I thought, wow, this is a great convertible. And while I was driving that car, Michael Jackson died. It was that day while we were doing the photo shoot. So I have this sort of like memory structure of being downtown San Francisco, hearing the news that Michael Jackson died, and then listening to like his greatest hits, the one album, the entire time I drove that car. And I'm explaining this to the Sacrilege Motors guy, and I'm like, what's missing from this car? And he's like, what? I'm like, the only thing that's missing is like a great sound system. And he's like, oh, well, there's a 12 in the trunk, or 12 or 15. It's a big sub in the trunk. And he's like, it's got great sound system. And I looked down and at the display, and he had CarPlay going, because it's a little CarPlay display, and Michael Jackson was playing. We just turned it up, and we had this moment. I'm like, here I am all of these years after Tesla Roadster having the same experience. Top down, open air, EV car that should not be cool, but was so interactive with great suspension, amazing steering. I mean, genuinely some of the best steering of any car ever. And I thought, fuck, I could do this.
Yeah.
Not personally at that price, obviously.
Yeah.
Which then started the whole discussion of daily driving, right? And so that I don't think the Sacrilege guys expect any of the owners of these cars to take them out as their sort of weekend cars, although I think they could. I think they're more like, this is a 911 that you can enjoy far more often because you're not worried about oil leaks. He mentioned oil leaks 7 times, and I thought,
he did that to me too.
Gives a shit?
I had the same thought. I was like, they just leak oil. That's what they do.
I should just have Valdez 1 through Valdez 10 as my license plates. I just don't care. A fucking drop of oil on the driveway.
Yeah,
but
it's an integral part of the air-cooled 911 experience.
It's an integral of all old car experience. Do you have any old cars that don't leak oil?
I think 1 or 2 of my Mercedes does not leak. Yeah, 2 of my Mercedes don't leak.
My Mercedes is the only one. We better knock on everything here. Get what?
Some of them do. But
I think my Mercedes is the only.
My R129 and my 124 do not leak.
My Honda doesn't leak. Of course, it's a Honda. Yeah. I'm sure it can hear me. It's within earshot, so it'd probably just shit out fucking 2 quarts of oil.
I.e. all of it.
It's 5 gallons of fuel, though. Let's hope it doesn't pour all of that out. I just kept thinking, like, they're right in that if I had unlimited financial resources or enough sufficient financial resources to own one of these cars, this would be the thing I'd go to the grocery store in.
Yeah.
Right. This would be the thing I would I had to sit in traffic.
Yeah. I would do everything. I mean, I have sort of coming to this conclusion lately because we recently sold a Carrera 3.2, which I had one of and dailied for 5 years. And I enjoyed the experience so much and the usability of that car so much, which my current car doesn't possess because it's kind of hot rodded in a way that's uncivilized. I said, man, I really miss dailying a 911, and that this car sort of parlays into that perfectly, which is that it would be just such a nice way to enjoy like world-class steering and like genuinely entertaining chassis, just no matter what you're doing.
Would you prefer it at cost parity to a Carrera 3.2, for example, or a base 964? Like if they were the same price. In
lieu of or in addition to?
If I said you're going to daily one of these cars, which one is it going to be? Is it just a regular 964 or is it a Sacrilege car? Or a regular 964 converted with this powertrain without maybe the interior, so it's not,
I would still choose the manual, but the point that he made to us, which I think is well taken, is that this is not a substitute for a regular 911. It's sort of a complement. There's certain use cases and scenarios where you drive this instead of the other one, but you still have the other one, and I think that's the right approach to this. This is the same sort of narrative that you describe in the context of EVs generally, is that it doesn't have to altogether replace. It's not either or. It's both and, ideally. That's not a reality for a lot of people, but for the people who are spending $850,000 on this thing, then that is a reality for them, is that you're not replacing some other car with this. You're adding it and you use it in certain circumstances. And so I think it makes a ton of sense in that context.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, what I really think is that this gives us hope that the next generation Boxster Cayman, which will be electric, could work. Now, I don't think it's going to.
It's not going to have the steering.
No.
And it's not going to be dimensionally compact like this. Correct.
That's where it could fall apart. But there is a world in which an electric Porsche could work. And now we go to Europe because we've talked about this ad nauseum, but there are places in Europe where you just can't drive a combustion car anymore. You can't.
Certainly not an old one.
No, yeah, you could have it as something Euro 6 or whatever the
with latest. A bunch of catalysts and turbochargers and 2 pedals and all that have sold new.
And so if you are...
Yeah, but if you have a 90s E34 BMW, you just can't go
You can't go home.
There.
You can't take it there, period. Yeah. And that's going to continue to happen around the world.
Yeah, it's like these 2002s that you were seeing that were EV converted that looked totally stock, but were EV converted.
Yeah, I really want to drive that one too. That guy was at Car Week and I managed to not ever run into him or hook up with him. But, 2002 is a wonderful car. It's not the engine that defines the car.
No, it's one of those cars where and this is always how I have felt historically about vintage cars that were EV converted, is that it makes the most sense for cars that are not, where the engine is not a really great part of the experience. It's perfect for a Citroen DS because that's a car with a tractor engine, or like you could see it being the case with like a Volkswagen Bug, or I think...
I don't think so.
Really?
I think that engine is so character. It's not the most beautiful noise in the world, but it's so different from everything else.
Yeah.
But there is absolutely no character from a DS. DS is the car that I use all the time as an example of a perfect Rolls Royce, right? Yeah. Where they tried to make the engine not even a bit player in the whole experience. Fine, great.
Yes, the loudest thing should be the ticking of the clock, etc., that you hear in the car at speed. And this is always why when I've seen people do this to a Testarossa before, and I'm like, I get that the engine is like not as present in that car as it should be, but this is surely not an improvement. That a Ferrari, the engine is the highlight of the car. Same thing about the BMW M10 engine. That 4-cylinder single cam engine is kind of just there to proceed the car, in my opinion. And so to dispose of it, to put an electric motor in it, doesn't offend me in the way that it would if you did it to a twin cam Alpha.
Yeah. I mean, maybe a 2002 converted to EV doesn't offend me, but an E30 would. Like a 325i.
If it were, unless it were an M42 car.
Yeah, then crush it.
Well, no. I mean, the right thing to do with one of those is to put a six-cylinder engine of some kind.
But yeah, I mean, I get shit from people all the time, friends locally, who want me to put an M50 in my E30 wagon, and I don't. And the reason, I would love that kind of power, of course, but to me, the defining characteristic of an E30, the most important thing to me is that engine. It's all about that M20. But maybe that's why I was so willing to accept the Tesla Roadster back in the day, because I always thought that the Toyota motor in the Series 2 Elise was a very powerful means to an end.
Sure.
Period. It was not the most characteristic.
Yeah, it's not a Honda engine. And that always is why the idea of a Honda engine in an Elise is so intoxicating.
If I find a K-swapped.
Yeah, it turns the sort of part of the car that's just sort of, like you said, a means to an end into the centerpiece of the car. Yeah. And that takes an already really remarkable, enjoyable car and...
It's so weird to say that about
Italianifies it.
Yeah.
But about an 8,500
RPM, variable valve timing,
twin cam,
200 horsepower,
valve,
1.8 liter.
95 horsepower per liter, whatever it is. 109. No, it's more than 100. It's 102, 103 horsepower
195 out of, or 192.
189 out of 1.8.
Yeah. And it's a small 1.8. It's like 1761 or so. It's not like, 1849. Yeah. I nothing against that 2ZZ from Toyota, but it just isn't the most character. If I found a Series 2 Lotus Elise with a K24 hybrid 20 swap, fuck me. I would have that. Then I'd have an Elise again.
There you have
Stop. Don't look. I don't want any more cars.
One moment, please.
No, stop it. I've never seen a K.
No, I don't think I have either.
Series 2. They'll start
Series
at
1.
some point. Hopefully. And then somebody will sell me one for pennies on the dollar. Yeah, interesting car. Really interesting car.
It really won me over, and I know that it is a tough hill for that thing to climb. And so I guess I was a good test case. And this was what he relayed about in terms of feedback that he'd received from a bunch of people who were die-hard Porsche people, was that once they experienced it, they were really sold on the experience.
Yeah,
I just wish that it was widely available and could be used, by lots of people on a daily basis.
I feel like it will be. I feel like we're going to start seeing EV
just this concept
cars.
generally. Yeah, not the specific car at 850, but yes, this general.
We're going to start seeing more. I mean, my advice to Lucid was very clear. That engine, that motor is so small and so compact, derate it down to 250 horsepower and make a universal application kit that I can just buy with a throttle and be done with it. And
I mean, that's not their business model, but it would be a hell of a product.
They would be. I mean, it would be the new LS. It would wind up in everything. Okay, you can buy a 200 horsepower version, 300, 400, 500. I mean, it'd be unbelievable to have a motor this big that fits in anything. But yeah, I think there's a market for it. There's a world in which, like, could I daily drive that instead of the e-Golf? Yeah, I think I would.
Yeah.
No. I would like to have 4 seats. Like that's, I'd like to have a hatchback, but we'd all like to have everything, but to have that sort of level of steering and
dynamic
coolness,
enjoyment. Yeah. Really compelling and well executed product. Interesting thought experiment for me also. It really challenged me to isolate sort of characteristics of the experience that matter to me.
And genius both in making that one a convertible, but also calling the whole company Sacrilege. I think it was really great.
To diffuse the...
Yeah. Immediately says, we know, we got this. We're not a bunch of eco-weenies who are trying to save the fucking planet. We just making a car, try it. If you like it, great. If you don't, call us Sacrilege and fuck off. And yeah, really cool. Really cool.
Yep.
Nice surprise. I'm glad we're so on the same page on this one.
I'm not surprised. Are you?
A little bit, because I thought I saw your reaction when you saw that it was a 964 America wide body doohickey shig or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, they made 250 of those cars. It pained me to see one sort of converted in that fashion.
Except that it wasn't. It's all put
it's
backable.
Reversible. Yeah.
The powertrain, I'm sure that interior is not, but
yeah, that part is fine.
Yeah. No, I'm here for the Sacrilege.
All right. Cool. Okay. I regrettably, or not regrettably, begrudgingly am as well.
We're done. That's it. Right. I have nothing more to add.
Okay.
Bye.
On to the next one.
Wait. See you guys next week. Now I'm done.